I'm really excited to move into this private sector session of the agenda. Forecasting Healthy Futures is always reaching out to the private sector, philanthropists, philanthropic organizations, and corporations. And we're going to hear from some of those most active in the climate and health space today. And I'm really excited for the panel discussion. We've been talking really all week about the health impacts of climate, and really, as we know now, the health and biodiversity impacts of climate change. We've been talking about how climate change is threatening our nutrition and food security, spreading disease, disrupting healthcare service delivery, and really undermining progress at every level, and the global health gains that we've made over the decades, as we've said. But there's also a real economic impact to that, and a couple earlier panelists have touched on it, but that's really what we're going to be looking at for the next couple hours. Forecasting Healthy Futures has been working with Accenture for the last few months on a really great piece of new research and a report that we are going to hear a little bit about today. The report will be released next month, but I'm really excited to have some of the insights presented as a Firestarter for our conversation with my other panelists. So before the other panelists come up, I want to introduce Ragini Chaudhary. Is Ragini with us? Hi, Ragini. How are you?
Ragini Hi, Kelly.
Okay, good. Wanted to make sure that we had your audio. Ragini is the Global Health and Development Strategy Lead at Accenture Development Partnerships, and she's been leading a lot of this research, so we're lucky to have her online. We'd be luckier to have you here in person. She ran into some challenges with getting here, but second best option, we get to hear her report on the insights that the team found in the research on how corporations are impacted by the health impacts of climate change on their workforce, through their supply chains, and throughout their customer bases. And over to you, Ragini.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and I hope I'm audible, and I also hope that my screen is visible. But really, thank you again, and thank you all for being here today and listening in to this session and very important topic. As Kelly mentioned, I'm Ragini Ahluwalia from Accenture Development Partnerships, and I'm really excited to share some of these insights with you today from our study with Forecasting Healthy Futures. The study is focused on furthering private sector engagement and action on the impacts of climate change on health and nutrition. Over the next 10 minutes, I'll be sharing some of our emerging insights from the study, covering why a holistic approach for climate and health is essential for the private sector, how organizations are currently being impacted, where we are seeing some leading initiatives, where we see opportunities to do more, and emerging enablers that we are seeing to drive greater action. And I will just check to confirm that my slides are moving. Yes, they are. So starting with why this is an important issue for the private sector to prioritize. We're seeing that across industries, 2.4 billion people are projected to be exposed to climate change-related work injuries every year. And in low and middle-income countries, climate-related morbidities and mortalities are estimated to drive economic losses of over $20 trillion. And 3.8% of total working hours globally could be lost in just 7 years due to temperature increases alone. These figures reveal the mounting toll that the climate crisis could take on workforce and community health, and therefore productivity and business continuity. We also duly recognize that climate mitigation efforts being undertaken by the private sector, such as lowering emissions or investing in clean energy, are absolutely critical, and commendable strides are being made. But mitigation alone will not be enough. These efforts will need to be complemented with robust adaptation strategies to strengthen resilience across ecosystems and communities. Therefore, to demystify and help solve for these challenges, Accenture and Forecasting Healthy Futures have partnered to examine how climate change is impacting the private sector in the health and well-being of their workforces, consumers, communities. Our study explores how leading multinationals are presently responding to these challenges and threats and analyzes what is being addressed strongly, where are there opportunities to do more, and how action can be further enabled. Looking at how these challenges play out from the perspective of the private sector, we see that the impacts of climate change on health and nutrition for the private sector largely fall under two risk areas. The first being workforce health, and the latter being consumer and community health. Beginning with workforces, workers are increasingly being exposed to rising temperatures and heat stress. This is taking a significant toll on their health and quality of life. But there are also exposures to extreme weather events, which lead to displacement or health insecurity, as well as surges in climate sensitive infectious diseases like malaria, cholera, and others. Beyond these exposures, climate change is also worsening chronic occupational illnesses such as lung or cardiovascular diseases due to degraded environmental conditions that they are working in. And lastly, the mental health toll, stress, anxiety, and trauma induced by climate instability not only severely impact individuals, but they also drive absenteeism, lower productivity, and long-term economic losses. Looking at the second the group on the right-hand side that we have here, consumers and communities, there are equally pressing risks on this side for businesses to consider. Due to climate change, consumers are facing evolving uncertainties in their product and service needs, such as for drugs, personal care, food products, or even financial services. And with intensifying hazards like floods or storms, critical infrastructure and supply chains can be damaged, which impacts communities' access to essential goods, services, and mobility. The security of public health and nutrition is also being threatened through direct or indirect climate change impacts. And when recovery and resilience is challenged, many are left with no choice but to migrate, which gives rise to displacement and vulnerabilities that further strain resources and safety. So, looking at all of these challenges, they are not posed or confined to any isolated incidents or sectors. Our study actually spans 10 industries across agriculture, consumer goods and services, energy, fashion retail, financial services, healthcare, information and communications technology, infrastructure, life sciences, and natural resources. Each industry faces its unique set of risks, shaped by their own operating environments, supply chains, and exposures. Taking agriculture, for instance, agricultural workers operate outdoors under intense physical strain, making them especially vulnerable to rising temperatures. These workers face a 35-fold higher risk of health impacts from extreme heat as compared to other industries. And in the financial services sector, the risks take a different form. During adverse events, workers face unplanned surges in caseloads, which lead to increased mental and physical stressors, such as a 62% surge seen in Kenya during recent flood-related insurance claims. In the consumer goods and services sector, the challenge manifests through shifting product and distribution needs. In Malawi, for example, a cyclone in 2023 left 20,000 households without access to essential health and personal products for several weeks. And in life sciences, higher temperatures can also increase drug-resistant bacteria. A 10-degree rise in average temperatures can lead to a 2 to 4% increase in antibiotic resistance, which not only impacts communities, but also shifts pharmaceutical consumption patterns. These risks can be deeply industry-specific and highly nuanced. To respond effectively, companies will need to understand their unique exposures and build tailored strategies to tackle these impacts. But the good news, and what we have uncovered through our analysis, is that there are already several leading initiatives to learn from across industries and corporations. We'll hear some really great examples from our panel that follows this presentation, but there are several other targeted actions that we are seeing that our study covers. For example, Bayer is developing climate-resilient crops to combat weather variability, which helps safeguard farmer livelihoods as well as their exposures to heat and other hazards, such as the Direct Acre program, which reduces physical labor by up to 50%. In the consumer goods space, Reckitt is leading with product distribution to support community resilience by improving access to water, sanitation and hygiene, and donating health and self-care products to disaster-affected communities, such as their distribution of mosquito repellent coils during the 2022 Pakistan floods. AXA Climate, committed to addressing climate-related insurance needs, has utilized new instruments like parametric weather insurance, which provides rapid payouts triggered by real-time weather indicators such as temperature spikes or insufficient rainfall. And they're currently supporting insurance for over 90,000 farmers in Africa against droughts through various local partnerships. BASF, in its infrastructure business, is designing disaster-resilient building materials that protect worker and community safety in areas that are prone to climate disasters. And they've been building heat-reducing construction solutions in Kenya. And in life sciences, GSK is investing significantly in developing vaccines and therapeutics for climate-sensitive diseases and antimicrobial resistance. GSK's malaria vaccine has already reached over 2 million children in Africa. While we are seeing meaningful progress being made, there are also significant opportunities to deepen efforts and also address some gaps. Starting with workforce health, we are seeing multinationals take steps to address heat stress and extreme weather events more strongly. They're investing in safety protocols, schooling, redesigned work environments. Some are even predicting extreme weather patterns and adjusting work schedules accordingly. However, we see that much of the current focus remains on more immediate threats. And there's a need for more attention to the longer-term, slower onset of chronic health risks posed by climate-sensitive infectious diseases or environmental degradation. And when it comes to mental health, while some resilience measures are seeing indirect benefits, there is a need for more targeted strategies. And on the consumer and community health side, multinationals are showing significant commitment to addressing challenges and providing essential products, services, and even innovations, especially for vulnerable populations. They're strengthening supply chains and supporting communities during disasters when local resources are stretched. While these efforts are making meaningful impact, there's also an opportunity to play a greater role in addressing the socioeconomic concerns that play out during these threats, such as support for affected communities with financial solutions, resources, and even infrastructure. Therefore, we believe that corporations today have a significant and unique set of opportunities to lead and innovate towards these risks. Given the scale, resources, and expertise at hand, we believe multinationals especially are uniquely positioned to advance long-term and data-driven adaptation strategies that can go beyond risk management. And lastly, for the private sector to effectively scale their efforts, some enablers do need to come together as strategic and operational imperatives. Businesses need to more proactively factor in impacts like shifting climate and disease patterns into strategic planning, risk management, and supply chain decisions. There's also a need for standardized data and metrics on climate and health risks, as well as adaptation outcomes, along with stronger policy alignment to drive investment and accountability. Third, no single entity can solve this alone. There's a need for collaborating across industries, corporations, and engaging policymakers, as well as partnering at the community level. And lastly, traditional funding models may fall short of meeting the scale and urgency of climate and health adaptation. And we may require newer models for financing, such as collaborative impact capital, blended finance, climate resilient bonds, and other innovative solutions. So with that, our intent is to put out a call to action across sectors to act now. There's an urgency as well as clear opportunities for corporations to embrace innovative adaptation measures and forge strong partnerships to navigate climate-driven health and nutrition risks and secure a sustainable future. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation today. We really look forward to your feedback on the report once published, as Kelly mentioned, in the coming month of May. We truly hope it helps drive focused and action-oriented conversations across industries. And with that, I'll hand this back over to you, Kelly, for what will surely be an incredibly interesting conversation with our panel on this topic.
Thank you, Ragini. And I hope that you'll be able to stick around and listen to this great panel, because we've managed to assemble really great representatives of 4 corporations from 4 separate industries of the 10 that our work with Accenture took a look at. So there was a lot to unpack there, and I know it's all going to be relevant to our panelists, so I think we can get started. I want the reason I love this research, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the corporate perspectives on it, is that when we think in environments and times of scarce resources, and we look to the private sector to help spark innovation or augment the investments that we can make in climate resilient health systems, we're often thinking about it through a philanthropy lens. We're often thinking about corporate social responsibility and grant-making potential of corporations. But actually, we very less frequently look at how the health impacts of climate change are impacting corporations and how they're mobilizing the resources and capabilities within their company to respond to those threats and tensions and impact, and where that is going to also benefit the communities where they live and work. So I think there's a lot here, and with no further preamble, I'll get started introducing panelists. Two of them are here in the room with us. So Sally and Tatiane, come on up. Great, thanks. Sally Uren is the Executive Director and Chief Acceleration Officer at Firm for the Future, which is an international sustainability nonprofit. She focuses on accelerating impact through strategic partnerships and high-profile engagements, and she's been leading the Climate and Health Coalition for some time, and I'm sure we're going to hear about some of the member companies of that coalition. Speaking of which, Haleon. Tatiane Ribeiro is the Head of Government Affairs and Sustainability for Latin America. She leads Haleon's efforts to integrate equity and climate resilience in partnerships across the region with a focus on community impact and sustainable access to care. Welcome, Tatiane. Thanks for being here. And then online, we have, I hope, yes, Cameron, Sid, hello. Cameron Hall is the Director of Strategy and Partnerships for Bechtel.org, where he leads initiatives at the intersection of infrastructure, climate resilience, and public health. So he brings, Bechtel is, many of you, and we'll hear more about it, but enormous public infrastructure firm, but working to direct those not insignificant capabilities and resources for smaller community-led initiatives. So I think you'll enjoy hearing from him. And Sid Chaturvedi is the Director of Product Management, Strategic Missions, and Technology at Microsoft. So Sid's part of Microsoft's work advancing data and technology solutions to measure climate risk, to protect health systems, to support decision-making across sectors, and so much more. So welcome to all of you. I've been looking forward to this conversation for some time. I've really enjoyed my conversations with each of you over the past weeks and months, and let's get right to it. I am going to commit to leaving 10 minutes for Q&A from the audience, which gives us 25 minutes. So I think that's enough to have a healthy amount of conversation. Let's get started, I think. I wanted to start with you, Sally, since you're representing a large number of corporations, and I'm sure you have so many insights and experience already with some of the themes and insights that were in the report that Ragini just gave. But you also are working closely enough with companies to understand how they're actually responding from a competitive business model, strategy perspective. So can you speak a little bit to that and what you're seeing?
Afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. Hello. Thank you. Just, making sure. Yes, I guess, first of all, just a bit more about me and the Climate and Health Coalition. So I'm the co-director of the Climate and Health Coalition, which is a group of private sector organisations. One of our founding partners was Haleon, and also non-private sector organisations, a couple of whom, one is at least in the room today, the CGI. And the purpose of the coalition is to really unlock the opportunity that we just heard about a moment ago. There really is an unprecedented opportunity for the private sector to drive co-benefits on climate, health, and nature and nutrition. And what we've been doing through the Climate and Health Coalition is creating really practical guidance that once organisations see the links between this agenda, they can act. And through that work, the business case for taking action on climate and health has become clearer and clearer. And I think for me, there are 4 really important parts of the business case for taking action on climate and health. And that speaks to how business models are evolving. The first, a healthy workforce is just good for business. And so we see lots of organisations, for example, one of our partners who isn't in the coalition, but we work with more broadly, they're called Belron, they're Autoglass in the US and in Europe. They have been busy changing the workwear of their employees to heat-resistant fabrics, which was a big investment, but actually it means that their workers are safer out in the extreme weather conditions that we've just been hearing about. We know that distribution organisations like UPS are switching to electric vehicles that are now enables better. Also really good for business because that ensures the security supply of, in this case, the mint. Number 3, when you start to think about solutions for climate and health, there's just such a raft of product and service innovation that you can think about, from in life sciences, vaccines and other medicines that don't need freezing. That means we can get those medicines out to the people that need them at the times that they need them most. We heard yesterday in the conversation around heat, all of this green infrastructure revolution. It just really makes complete business sense, and maybe we'll hear more of this from Bechtel. And then one of our other partners in the coalition, Bupa, they are a health service and insurance company, really going to market with digital tools to enable diagnostics, which means that more people can access those diagnostics, so tick for health equity, but you don't need to travel. And then the 4th part of the business case is brand equity and reputation. Again, back to Haleon, the work that you've been doing through the Otrivin brand, which is for asthma inhalers, has just been incredible in terms of providing solutions but building brand equity. And then from our food toolkit, which we published in November of last year, we showcase M&S, a UK retailer that probably no one has ever heard of here in Brazil, but they're much loved in the UK. And they've been running a campaign called Eat Well, which is to try and shift behaviour to lower carbon, healthier foods. And that's really building brand equity. So the business case has never been stronger.
Thank you, Sally. That's great to have those ticked off like that. I noticed that one thing you didn't mention is net zero strategies. So this is above and beyond anything that corporations are doing for ESG or philanthropy. These are actually strategically aligned in operational efficiencies from their workforce through the supply chain, through product innovation, which obviously also then impacts a much broader community, and then with the strength of their brand. And all of those things will, especially I think probably the brand equity, we can also pivot on for mitigation purposes.
Exactly. So the net zero strategy sits underneath all of that because it isn't mitigation or adaptation. We absolutely have to accelerate both right now. And net zero business benefits are really clear. Security supply of energy. If you've got renewable distributed energy, then in severe weather, your energy is still being provided. And it's often lower cost now in many parts of the world, and it drives huge efficiencies. So yeah, I took it as read, the business case for net zero, but happy to go on, but we probably should move on.
No, that's great. That's so much to think about. And Tatiane, I want to hear what you've been thinking about as you listen to Sally. Are those familiar operational challenges and opportunities? We talk a lot about the workforce being maybe the most direct and obvious way that the health impacts of climate change affect the bottom line. But obviously for some industries, that's more true than others. What about the other things too that Sally mentioned, supply chain and...
I think that, well, first, hello everybody. It's nice to meet you all and thank for the opportunity to represent Haleon at this forum. I think that we can start talking a little bit about Haleon. And when we talk about Haleon, we have a strong purpose, which is deliver better everyday health with humanity. And when we talk about everyday health, we recognize the burden of the climate change on the population's health. So it's a major concern for us. And when we were launched like 3 years ago, so a quite new company, we came with strong commitments to reduce our carbon emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3, reducing carbon emissions, scope 1 and 2, by 100% by 2030, which we have reduced 50% just by last year. So we are moving forward that. And when you think about operational challenges and being from LatAm region, so I sit in LatAm, especially in Brazil currently, we have different challenges when we go to different markets. Of course, Latin America has a lot of development challenges. We lack infrastructure and we lack resources that we see in most developing countries like Europe and the United States. So I think one of the things that is quite good in companies like Haleon is to push those commitments, but also allow markets to be creative and look for resources that best apply to the business. So moving towards a more sustainable business is not an economic burden to the markets. So a good example, we can talk about Brazil. So last year, we just replaced our energy sourcing for the factory that we have here in Rio from electric to 100% carbon neutral. So now we're using biogas from a company that is from Rio and Seropédica, so it's quite new. The technology was developed by the company, and it was very easy to transform our factory with low investments. So by 2025, we'll be 100% carbon free. We'll be one of the 9 factories that Haleon worldwide that already can consider carbon neutral. And we have other examples in other countries like Indonesia and Slovakia. One of them has a steam boiler, another of them is using solar panels. So how can we adapt the countries regarding its own resources and ensure we are moving towards our goal, but at the same time, we are considering budgeting and the best practices in each environment. But we have lots of different examples we can use, either from Haleon here, new technology, for example, creating toothpaste that are not water-based, so we use less water, replacing RLR packaging to a sustainable and ready for recyclable packaging. So all of this is being pushed worldwide, and the countries are applying as they can within their own markets.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like Haleon is really taking a leadership stance in terms of your own net zero aspirations, which are very ambitious, and congratulations on some of those successes here in Brazil. That's amazing. And then you described a lot about product innovation to respond to the changing needs of your consumers. Can you give the summit participants a couple brands? I know a lot of people might not know what Haleon produces.
A lot of people know the brands.
Yeah.
We have Advil and we have OTC medicines. We also have, for example, respiratory brands we don't have here currently in Brazil, but worldwide we have Sensodyne. It's one of the largest brands for teeth sensitivity. We have Centrum, which is a multivitamin. And when we think about access, which is a big flag for Haleon worldwide, we want to provide access for better everyday health to the people. And when we look over to our brands and nutrition, which is a big gap in Brazil, how do we build products that can relate to the population that is of low income? So last year we launched Central Essential that was mapped with 30 years of studies of nutrition of the Brazilian population and what are the multivitamins they lack most. So we call it essential because it combines 7 essential vitamins that people need. And we launched last year. It was a tremendous success because the price point is 4 times less than a regular Centrum package. So when we talk about multivitamins, it's really important for nutrition. But other programs we have related to health, it's how we build knowledge and database information to healthcare professionals through our programs. So we have Care for Every Breath, which was originally launched in Egypt, where we have tools and information to equip better healthcare professionals regarding respiratory care on climate change and climate health, because a lot of countries, especially the low-income countries with tropical climate, have a lot of impact. So how we build professionals to share with their patients these information on how to take better care, when they should use some type of OTC medicine to support their care, what are the practices that are the best. And this is also a platform online where healthcare professionals can go and get all the information that they need to train and also to share with their patients.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So what I'm hearing is you're operating with environmental sustainability and stewardship. You're developing products that in themselves are environmentally sound, and you're changing your product sort of distribution strategies and the composition of the products to address the new health impacts of climate that we're seeing, and very importantly, to not let climate change exacerbate inequities in health delivery. And so that's fantastic and great to hear. And you mentioned this amazing power transformation of your big factory. That's really cool. I think that's a great segue to Cameron, who works on large infrastructure. And I imagine lots of your clients, Cameron, are aspiring to do the same with their manufacturing. And that's, I'm sure, something you get a lot of. But first, a little closer to home with this report, Cameron, tell us a little bit about what you are seeing with infrastructure needs related to health in communities or in your large corporate clients. And tell us some of the trends that you're seeing, and were any of Ragini's points, did any of them resonate with you in Bechtel.org's work?
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation to participate. It's cool and rainy where I am right now, so the idea of being in warm and sunny Rio is really, really appealing. So I'm really regret that I couldn't be there.
Should have come.
Maybe, but before I kind of answer that question, maybe it's helpful to provide a little background on Bechtel.org and what we do exactly. So Bechtel.org, we're a social enterprise of the Bechtel Corporation. So Bechtel Corporation is a very large global infrastructure and construction company. The corporation does projects on the scale of airports, marine ports, hydro dams, railways, motorways, really national scale infrastructure projects. About 5 years ago, the Bechtel.org was created as a social enterprise with a mandate to collaborate with communities to develop community-level infrastructure projects in globally underserved communities. And we use those terms very broadly. And we do that in 3 ways. One is we connect with communities and collaborate to identify infrastructure needs. Then, as a second part, we structure projects with the community in a way that maximizes impact. So not only through the intervention that the project is meant to address, but also secondary and follow-on impacts as well, which is where you have the intersection of this conversation of climate and health. And then lastly, we aren't implementing organizations, so to speak, in the work that we do. Rather, we are stewards of the localization agenda. And we identify local organizations, whether it's for-profit companies, NGOs, other local organizations, and we embed some of our talent that we have in our global corporation, embed them into local project teams to help those organizations deliver at scale. So whether it's across multiple geographies, navigating difficult supply chains, so on and so forth, we add very specific, targeted, additional capacity to local organizations, so that these are learning and capacity building opportunities for those organizations, which then help in the long-term sustainability of these projects. So using that as a frame for how we engage, I think there are two interesting examples of how we've supported projects at this intersection of climate and health. So one is through energy security projects. So we've collaborated with local partners in Papua New Guinea, and we have identified medical facilities on remote islands and have installed solar installations at these medical facilities to provide 24-hour access to energy, which then, supports, medical outcomes within these facilities. And particularly, we targeted facilities that had maternity clinics. So we could also help with, health outcomes around maternity and newborn health. But then also through that, through the solarization projects, we're also decarbonizing the energy needs of those medical facilities, which then has a knock-on effect of reducing exposure to supply chains for diesel fuel. So then these medical clinics can then use the what would have been high-cost diesel fuel, spend that money instead on furthering other medical and health outcomes through the clinic. So it's really, the intersection of several different interventions are helping to increase health and wellness outcomes of remote, island communities in Papua New Guinea. The other project I wanted to highlight is a project we have in high altitude indigenous remote communities in Peru. So, through climate change, we've noticed that these high altitude communities in the Andes are having higher daytime temperatures and lower nighttime temperatures, which is creating, issues of respiratory illness in these communities. And particularly because the homes within these communities aren't heated at nighttime. So families are exposed to these large deltas of temperature change from day to night. So we're able to work with these local communities in collaboration with universities in Peru to identify, again, a solar solution that retains latent heat during the daytime that can then be used at nighttime to heat the internal living spaces of homes, to reduce that exposure to the nighttime cold. And we were able to do this not only through installing solar panels, but also, identifying materials that are easily accessible by these communities. So these aren't really difficult, complicated, technical solutions that require very specific components, but rather, components that can be easily resourced in surrounding and neighboring communities, which then helps with the ongoing operations and maintenance of these projects. So it helps with the sustainability and long-term resilience of these projects, and so therefore the long-term health outcomes within these communities.
Fantastic, Cameron. Thank you. You're seeing a progression here. We've talked about the health of the workforce and its central role to a company's profitability and operations. We've talked about product innovation that addresses the health impacts of climate change among consumers and customers. And then Cameron, now you're bringing this down to like the actual infrastructure and the environmental determinants of health, both for your own workforce, but those of your customers and those in communities where you work. So that infrastructure piece is critical. What we haven't talked a lot about is data, and so that's a way to transition to you, Sid. We think about data increasingly as a real key to climate resilience in the form of the predictive capacity that it enables. Later today we'll hear a little bit, or tomorrow we'll hear a little bit more about that in detail, but I'd love to hear how Microsoft is using its core capabilities in technology, data, and applying it to this, to the challenge of climate-driven health threats and pressures.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Unlike Cameron, I'm here in pretty rainy Seattle, so Rio sounds exciting. Uh, I would have loved to have been there, but while we're here, like let me take a trip down memory lane of human health before we get to the planet. And one of the earliest ways to detect a disease in humans was looking at the temperature of the person. So essentially, you would put a hand on the forehead or a hand on the cheek and figure out if the person's hot or not, and then you would give them medicines accordingly. Since that point of time, we've evolved. We have things like of course, we have the thermometers, but we have the MRI machines, the CT scans, and a whole bunch of pathology and diagnostics testing that has allowed us to really zero in on diseases and understanding the human health in ways that we could not. Today, we are trying to treat the planet with a thermometer. That's where we are. So having higher fidelity and higher frequency of information to measure what matters is important. And that allows us to also have these more intelligent intervention designs to help with the fiscal offsets from helping a community to survive to helping a community to thrive, whether that's breaking the intergenerational transfer of disadvantage, whether it's assuming fiscal responsibility for introducing chemicals to keep the people healthy. And that a good example of that is fogging during the mosquito season in India. I grew up in Western Uttar Pradesh, so thank you for working over there. That is near and dear to my heart. And also opening up new business models that allow us to go from consumptive to non-consumptive, value-based, quality-based metrics. So what we are building at Microsoft is essentially what I would classify a smartwatch for the planet. So we take together a variety of different sources of data that are already there, whether it's geospatial data, air quality, water quality, and temperature, of course. But we also now do something called ecological baselining or biotic sampling. And we start off with arthropods, which is insects, which make up the majority of the environment and help you as an early detection mechanism. Then we go deeper into the metagenomics of that. There's a concept called the eDNA. Kudos to Kat Bruce. She runs a company called Nature Metrics in the UK. That's where the idea came from. But essentially what we needed to have was ways to capture the ecological DNA at cheaper and at fidelities that allowed us to deploy these at scale. So that's where we invested in robotics and AI to really bring this together. And what we are seeing is implications across public health. We are seeing implications across sustainability reporting and land change use. So we are seeing ourselves as our customer when we change the use of land. For example, if you're using biomimicry to open a new data center, how do we make sure that we go beyond carbon reporting to help people understand that we are essentially like doing things to maintain the ecological balance of the place that we are investing in. There's a whole bunch of stuff we can talk about, product management and product design, to make sure that the stuff that we build is not also harming. So we do things like data minimization, and we use algorithmic coding in different languages. So Python, for example, is X times more carbon polluting than C# and C++. So we do all of those minor offsets as well to make sure that we are minimizing our footprint as we build these measures to help you look at things to prevent further decay of the planet.
Great, Sid, thank you. So the health impacts of climate change are really impacting the needs of your customers and so directing your product development to some extent. Is it fair to say that in the information technology industry, the issues of the health impact on your workforce are not the significant driver in your strategies when it comes to climate and health? Or does that also factor in?
It does factor in, because when you, before Microsoft, I used to run my own startup Invest in UP, and it was called Societal Health and Education. We had given it an acronym SHE, because societal health and education allows the break from the intergenerational transfer of disadvantage. And when you see in places where there are factories or where they're a lot of labor intensive, works, you see these familial patterns emerge, which is like people want to live with their families. The families have to be exposed to certain kinds of risks. The person is the sole earner, who's generally earning per diem, so per day, which means that if a loss of productivity happens, there is a loss to the entire familial like income, which then transfers to the people, the children, the wife, the husband, whoever the person is, who's not the sole earner, taking care of the sole earner, which means that detracts from education, which causes another generational of transfer of disadvantage. And we worked extensively with the University of Liverpool to deconstruct this and say, okay, if we put early warning detection devices, for example, we've deployed in Nepal right now, what is the intervention design that we can help with? We are not building the interventions ourselves, but we work with community-based organizations that are doing these interventions to stop that intergenerational transfer of disadvantage, to help lift people out of poverty, to have a better quality of life, which is why like the value and the quality of life factors are top of mind for us.
Fantastic. Yeah, so it's not as obvious as we know a lot about the heat impact on labor productivity, but what you've just illustrated is that there's so many indirect cascading impacts on families and communities, and absenteeism then, and all of those, the implications of community health more generally. So fantastic. We just have a couple minutes because I really want to take some questions from you all, and I'm saving space for Sally to tell us a little bit about some work of the Climate and Health Coalition recently. So I want to just do one rapid fire. I'm sorry, I wish we had another hour to talk about this. And I thought I would ask just one thing that's missing, one data set, one partnership, or one core capability within your company that would really unlock more potential for impact at the intersection of climate and health. Do you want to start, Tatiane?
Yes, I think this part of having database and how we take this data to make informed solutions for the future of health. Haleon had, since its founding in 2022, made a partnership with Economist Impact, where we're building research and robust evidence regarding health inclusivity. So this research is for 40 markets of Haleon worldwide, and it's divided into 3 phases. We are currently going to launch phase 3. The first phase, it mapped the inclusivity in policy and also in infrastructure in the countries. So how people access health if they have good policies that allows them to get access to health care, and also if you have good infrastructure to attend health. In the second phase, we adapted into consideration what is the people's perception of the infrastructure and the policy that is currently in place in those countries. So what we didn't imagine is that when we moved to countries that had good ratings regarding access to health in phase 1, when you look for policy and infrastructure, when you get to the people, they're not perceiving their access to health as the same. And one of the things that are really mapped during phase 2 is, especially in lower income countries, people are really worried about the impacts of climate change on their health, regarding when you compare to higher income countries. The youth is also very worried about the impact of climate change of their health, as they're going to live more, and they're seeing that on a daily basis. This is what we're building to phase 3, where we are coming with a set of recommendations for countries regarding how policymakers can address health inclusivity, changing some of the perceptions in the country, but also tackling the impact of climate change in health. So for phase 3, which will be launched on the 15th of May, we have a study that shows the economic burden of air pollution into the population's health. So that's really important, because then policymakers can quantify and tackle those gaps instead of trying to find a solution to the problem. For example, we find a gap in phase 2 was people that have very difficult time commuting to health centers. So the health centers there, people are there to attend them, but they cannot afford go. If they have work hours, they cannot miss work. So how we are providing policymakers to make those changes. That's one of the parts that we're doing, but also applying internally. So one of the main gaps was health literacy. So people lack information to take better care of their health. So how can we create programs, as I spoke, the For Every Breath program, We Care for Every Breath, that we teach healthcare professionals to equip their patients with good information about their own health regarding to climate change.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to say that the single thing missing there is health literacy. And so to address that, you're working through healthcare providers, you're influencing policy at the national level, you're out there getting data as a baseline, but really what would really help and unlock your capacity to deliver services and equitably to consumers whose needs are changing as a result of climate change is everyone to be fully aware, the broadest sense of health literacy.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. All right, we're going to have to make a little bit more rapid fire. Over to you, Cameron. What's the single thing that if Bechtel had access to internal capabilities or partnerships, it would really make a substantive difference in your engagement in climate and health?
I think the really quick and straight answer for me would be public, nonprofit, and private partnerships. There is so much, there's so much more overlap than we recognize in the work that each of those three sectors do that could really bring to scale not only the financing available for projects, but the potential impact of projects. And so I would say that the private partner, nonprofit partnerships.
Great, that's fantastic. And that makes sense. And you're working on infrastructure in hard-to-reach communities that you're working alongside ministries of health and ministries of environment. Luckily, we're going to have our next panel actually is all about public-private partnership. And so maybe you'll find a nugget there that will be helpful. All right, over to you, Sid. As briefly as you can, what's that one thing that would really unlock Microsoft's abilities to have an impact? Climate and health.
I think more than Microsoft, it's with our partners. We would love to understand the localized belief and awareness systems led by communities so that we can be integrative and aware of how they perceive different things. So mental health and behavior patterns are top of mind because they are the most undocumented side of the human health ecosystem.
Great, so kind of a combination of what Cameron said and Tatiane said, partnerships in search of access to better information, knowledge, understanding of what's needed so you can direct your data and your services in the right direction. Fantastic. All right, do we have questions? Remember that questions are submitted through the app. We're going to take a few minutes still and would love to have any questions if there are some. And I can't see anybody if they're shaking their head back there. Maybe we don't have any questions through the app. All right. Well, keep in mind that the discussion board in the app is asynchronous. You can leave a question there, and I hope that Sally, Tatiane, Sid, and Cameron will take a look and maybe respond to you over the app. So take advantage of them being here and use the app. And I also will look to the app for questions and do my best to steer them to the right places. All right, with that, Sally, and I think Sid and Cameron, if we can stay and listen to Sally.
Fine.
You've got some slides though, so
I have.
the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So hopefully some slides will appear as if by magic. This is where you find you've got a very high level of trust in technology. But while the slides catch up with me, I just wanted to... oh, that's better. I think I was hearing two of me. Is the audio okay? Yeah?
Yeah.
It's echoing through that one. Right, okay. So this is a really important moment for us at the Climate Health Coalition because just yesterday we launched our latest guidance document, which is really focused on the intersection of health and climate resilience, and actually picks up a lot of the themes we've been hearing about over the last 24 hours. And just for avoidance of doubt, who is the Climate Health Coalition? There are these wonderful organisations here, which includes Forecasting Healthy Futures, includes the Clinton Global Initiative, also WEF. I know you're going to hear from Matthew in a moment. And really what we're trying to do with the coalition is, as I said earlier, unlock private sector action, but also create the connectivity amongst this burgeoning climate and health ecosystem in which we're all so involved and so committed to. And it's really deliberate that we bring together non-private sector actors with private sector actors, because just to the previous point, that is the foundation for the cross-sectoral partnerships, which in the end will give us the acceleration that we need. So if you want to find out anything more about the coalition, then I'm knocking around. I'm easy to see. I'm in the colour of green, because that's consistent with this themed conversation. So why climate and health equity? What we are trying to do with this report is to pull together some of the messages that have been in our previous guidance and actually really underscore some of my opening remarks in the panel a moment ago, and really make the case for why we really believe the private sector needs to think about climate and health equity together, because there is a really strong business case here. Health and environment are inseparable. We've heard that a lot over the last couple of days. Health outcomes are a function of access to clean air, clean water, and so forth. And particularly as we're in really volatile operating conditions right now, in fact, I haven't heard the word tariff all day, so this might be the first. It's so volatile out there, but actually by thinking about climate and health as an integrated set of issues, we can actually build business resilience. We know that a business is as healthy as the ecosystem around it, and that includes the health and resilience of communities. And really what we need to understand better is that businesses are part of this messy, complicated set of systems, and actually working with communities to build resilience also builds business resilience. We've heard the need for integrated solutions, and I think really at the essence of your last question, Kelly, which I loved, was you're poking out, so what's the leadership that we need to see here? And we are entering into a world, I think we're already in it, extreme volatility, but also scarce resource. And now is a time for leadership from not just the private sector, but from others. So we go on at length about why we need to take integrated action on climate and resilience. But what we do in the report is set out, well, what can we do? What are these strategies for action? We set out how we can create integrated climate and health strategies. And that's what our climate and health coalition partners in the corporate sector have been doing now for many years, making multi-million-dollar investments to enable that integration. We talk about how we can create strengthened workforce and community resilience. And one of the examples we use here is from Boston Medical Center. And they've got something brilliant called the Clean Air Prescription. So Boston Medical Center generates its own renewable energy. It's serving underserved communities where electricity bills are really high. And actually what it's doing is generating credits that then are kind of discounting the energy bills. So it's called a clean energy prescription, and it's just a genius way of decarbonizing but also strengthening community resilience. We've heard a lot about multi-sector partnerships here. One of my favorites right now is another couple of Climate Health Coalition partners, Reckitt and Bupa, have created something called the Camden Breathe Better Pledge, which is a coalition of businesses, the local authority in the London Borough of Camden, other public sector organisations to address clean air quality in Camden as a way of, again, ensuring community and workforce health and well-being. I mentioned Haleon and the mint supply chain, which is a good example of building supply chain security. What I didn't mention was why. Actually, Tatiane then mentioned that. Haleon supplies Sensodyne toothpaste. That's why they need the mint. Health literacy education, a lot happening in this space. We talk about the J&J Climate and Health Equity Fellowship, but there's also other brilliant activities where we're really building, particularly the enabling education among community health professionals. And then, yes, we need to aggregate the data. We need to aggregate data on air quality with data on climate emissions. We're just beginning to understand how to do that, also aggregate data around biodiversity, because the sooner we can aggregate these data sets and present them as health outcomes, then the more we can target the action that is needed. And Kelly, my final thought was, you were asking, what's the one thing that the corporates need? For me, the one thing that I think we need more of, which is to really bring these strategies to life and to really foster collective action at scale across private and public actors, is I think we need more trust, and I think we need a stronger shared sense of vision. When we bring systems together, there's sometimes a trust deficit. We don't have time for that right now, so now is the time to really create the conditions where all boats rise, and actually the private sector, the public sector, philanthropy, civil society, non-profits can come together in this beautiful harmony of creating impact at scale. And that's what this report is all about. Oh, and I nearly forgot, I've got quite technical. There's a QR code. You can scan a link to the report. We're also hosting a webinar with Emmy from Healthcare Without Harm. She's one of our panelists. So please scan the QR code and we'll share the slides afterwards. But thank you for my 5 minutes. It might have been 6.